Welcome back. The week ahead continues. Now, the South African Social Security Agency, Sassa's Chief Executive Officer, is expected to brief members of the public. This is in the coming week about the social grant reviews that are being undertaken to targeted beneficiaries suspected of having additional sources of income that was not disclosed to the agency. So amongst many other issues, the agency is set to address issues surrounding its inability to also appoint a credible grant payment system provider, as this will also jeopardize as many as 2 million Sassa beneficiaries who may not be paid from October 2025 onwards. Perhaps to speak a little bit more about the impact of this debacle, we're going to be joined by human rights organization Black Sash Abigail Peters, CMB, and research manager, of course, who's just raised concerns regarding some of the challenges faced by Social Security Agency. But we did invite Sassa as well. Fortunately, they couldn't be with us, but let's continue with this discussion here as Abigail joins us. Good afternoon, and thank you for your time on the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Well, Abigail, it's pertinent issues, and we're obviously seeing the millions that are going to be impacted. So we're exploring what is at stake here and where to from here. Talk to us about, amongst some of the many issues, you expected to have a sit-down with Sassa, and what are those burning issues that you will be tabling?
Well, some of the burning issues that we have had is not having beneficiaries be informed in good time. And many of those who have found out that they are up for review have only found out on the day of the payment. And that what that means is they are then referred to a Sassa office, to which they will have to present themselves and then to see what the reason for the review is. And in these cases, people have to make multiple trips, give out extra money that they haven't had because they have not been paid, as their grants have been flagged to be one that may be receiving an extra income or an unreported income. And so for us, it's important that there's clear communication and people have clear steps of not only where they need to go, but what they need to have and bring to these Sassa offices.
Okay, Abigail, so the first issue, is obviously addressing the issue regarding beneficiaries suspected of having additional income sources. And, Black Sash looking at how it's going to address the issue. But even if we extend, further to Sassa's inability to appoint a credible grant payment system provider, how that's jeopardized the entire Sassa grant payment system. Weigh in a little bit further on that as well ahead of the talks.
Well, I think it's important that social grants are a constitutional right, and people who are receiving grants should have access to them without any interruptions and without any difficulty. And so, of course, there has been issues in the grant payment system where from the beginning of this year, we've seen with the swap to the black cards, post-bank cards, had been riddled with many issues. There were glitches in the system. People didn't receive their grants on time on the card. They were not able to swap their cards on time. And of course, later on, the replacement of the card being suspended. So various issues that affect the grant beneficiary receiving their grant on time and being able to have access to that constitutional right. And so that is the issue, because we're dealing with the most vulnerable in South Africa, and those who have access to grants for a living, to be able to survive, to be able to provide food, to be able to take care of their children. And that is being infringed upon by not being able to access their grants well enough and on time. And these, of course, we are able to be in these spaces because we are those who are in the position as Black Sash to speak to these issues, because we have voices on the ground with our community partners that we work with, community partner organizations, as well as our regional officers who are working on the ground and hearing all of these stories and putting these reports together to speak to Sassa to flag about the issues that are coming up.
What about exploring alternative funding sources? But even if we look at many along the value chain, if we're going to look at what, could be employed, we're looking at private sector, NGOs, fintech players as well, to assist in perhaps reducing queues, digitizing the grant system, obviously, because there's other infrastructure issues that also come to the fore. What's going to be explored on that front?
Well, I think that there is some form of movement towards digitization, even within the application processes that Sassa has put in place, where people are now able to go to Sassa offices and use kiosks that are available for people to interact with grants and be able to receive assistance, even being able to access online through their phones. And this also obviously is riddled with a lot of issues, especially for those receiving the social relief of distress grants, where there has been issues with receiving the links to verify that the person is the person that is supposed to be receiving the grant. So what we are seeing is that there is an attempt to create a space that is easier on technology, being able to provide this accessibility, but we are dealing with the poorest of poor. We're dealing with vulnerable people who are dependent on grants and who don't have access to smartphones, who are not able to access that digital space to be able to still receive their grants. And so that is definitely an issue as a talking point for us to be able to see how that can be kind of ironed out and created in a way that is easy accessible for people and make the situation or easier than it is harder for them to access grants.
Abigail, I mean, beneficiaries have also been given about 80 days to change banks as Black Sash, addressing that issue, making sure that the message is clear to some of the other beneficiaries. Talk to us a little bit more about that. Some are saying that the process is slow, it's unclear. It's full of red tape as well. Help us also understand what's been happening on that front.
Well, what we are seeing is a lot of people, of course, are now having to go to Sassa offices to be able to address, let's go back to the verification issues, and the lines or the queues are very, very long. So there's an influx of people not only having to address this issue of verification, which requires you to then see what has been flagged. And of course, this comes through a national process where social grants that have been flagged, detected as having alternative sources of income correct. So then they are sent in bulk to regional offices to then be able to respond to those beneficiaries. So people then have in their mind the alternative to say, well, maybe I should change my card or change to a bank account through which I can easier receive my grant because I'm having issues. But in this space, they still have to present themselves at the Sassa offices and to provide the documentation that is needed to either prove that they are not receiving an extra income or to show that they are no longer married if they were divorced, to provide details of their children through birth certificates to prove that these are dependents that they are receiving the grants for. And then, of course, then once that process is done, they are then said to be okay, that all the details are correct, and that person will then again receive their grants within that month. But the issue here is that card that they do have is something that people are thinking about now. Is the issue with my card, and shouldn't I just go to a private bank to be able to receive my card? But we can't skip this review process as yet if you have been flagged, because in the background, they might have been able to see that there's some form of income coming into your account that you have to present and be honest about.
Well, that social grant review briefing, obviously, by the CEO of Sassa taking place this week. Abigail, I know as Black Sash, there's going to be lots to question, particularly because so many vulnerable, South Africans are obviously going to be impacted and are impacted. Thank you for your time at this hour. We'll leave the conversation there. Abigail Peters, the CMB and Research Manager at Black Sash, weighing in on some of the expectations ahead of that briefing.